Welcome to this special bonus episode of the Accounting Influencers podcast with me, Rob Brown. And we are just tapping into the season of events right now. I'm thrilled to have with me today Vipul Sheth from Advanced Track Outsourcing, who ran a terrific event just recently. And it was all about accountants of the future and what does the firm of the future look like. And we've got some of his speakers here. It was quite a varied roster. We had Louise Walpole from Moneypenny and some other speakers on a whole range of diverse topics. Vipul, welcome. We're going to introduce your guests in just a moment, but why do you put on this event?
Hi there, Rob. Well, I think first and foremost, we're very much about engaging with our customer base and wanting to give them ideas on keeping themselves at the forefront. We'd like to think that the majority of firms we work with use technology well, they use outsourcing well, and what we're trying to do is keep them at the front of the queue. And they'll already be adopting a number of ideas that are shared during the day, but we hope that there'll be a few nuggets that they'll take away and say, you know what, we need to go and do that. This is our project, or there's a couple of projects that come out of the ideas that are shared, one on stage, but actually the networking that happens across the day between the delegates. So for us, this was our fifth iteration of the in-person event. So
yeah, well, we'll put a little bio of you all in our show notes for this so that people know who you are. So we don't waste too much time with introductions. You're all very well known in the accounting and fintech space. Aynsley, you're well known for being at the bleeding edge of innovation and technology. You were an observer throughout the whole day. How would you describe the general theme of the event?
Well, I mean, for me, the venue was just stunning, and Vipul always does an amazing job of choosing amazing venues. So I think the venue itself was just absolutely mind-blowing. So thanks, Vipul, for yet another incredible venue, especially for your 20th year. So congratulations to that as well. I think that
How does the venue
awesome.
make a difference, Aynsley? Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, look, venue is really important because this is about changing mindsets, and it's about getting people to think differently. And I think having a venue that's different, a venue that takes people out of their norm, a venue that's slightly just makes people go, oh, that's what's really great about having a really cool venue. So I think that was great to come to an amazing space and to go, wow. And that's a great intro to the day and a great way to start thinking differently about your own firm and your business going forward.
Yeah. And quickly, Aynsley, about the audience, we're very mindful of being five middle-class guys on a podcast here, but it was a very diverse event. And tell us a little bit about the audience as well.
Well, hugely, and it's just unfortunate that Louise couldn't join us today. So, I mean, that is just a shame. We are very mindful, and there is a diversity and inclusivity is very important to all of us. But the event itself was wide. I mean, there was a great attendance. It was across mainly the larger accounting firms in the UK. I would say they are probably the top 100 firms that were there. But we had a complete cross-section of the teams that were attending, and it was great to see so many people who were so engaged and so interested about, especially that topic for accounting for the future. It sounds like a kind of a broad topic, but it was really interesting where the discussions went and what people were thinking about, and creating a more sustainable firm in the future, a firm that was going to be more successful, a firm that was going to deal with all the issues and challenges that are in the industry at the moment. And particularly, I'm sure we'll get to talent shortage being one of the primary challenges. And also that, age-old adoption of technology, and how do we actually manage this, and how do we bring it into play? It's not a panacea. It is part of an overall firm process, and it's how do firms actually manage that change successfully? And I don't know, Dermot was certainly talking about that in his topic too. So yeah, a really, really amazing event to be part of.
Oh, you've been pushing accountants to change and innovate and adapt, and sometimes kicking and screaming, but sometimes they've gone along with you for the ride. How receptive do you feel people were to the things you were telling them on the day?
I think what's important is the people who show up are welcoming the change, they're welcoming the challenge. So you've got a receptive audience in that context. They've taken an extra day out of, everyone's calendar's busy. They've taken an extra day out to hunt out the next gem, the next insight, the next piece of change that can impact on their business, their clients, their team, whatever their priority is. And so I'd say the audience was definitely on the top end of the receptive scale. And, you know, Aynsley's point about the venue challenging, you know, mindsets is, I think, can't be overstated, on the grounds that actually, you know, the main content of my piece was you've got to challenge the status quo. And it's what's lovely is you're talking to an audience who've done that by showing up to a brand new, different style of venue. And it was, you know what it's like, Rob, you know, different audiences, different tones. The tone was good. And you know it's good when you get to coffee. And then, like Vipul says, the interaction was there.
Yeah, totally. Dermot, you've been in this game a long time. What kind of shape do you feel the accounting profession is in right now? Because they're not known for their agility and their willingness to adapt and look forward too much, are they?
Well, thanks for calling me experienced. Much appreciated. So I think the whole term around, you know, accountants not being adaptive to change is, you know, you have to take with a little bit of salt, especially when you've got, you know, people like Aynsley and Vipul, you know, on this podcast, you know, two examples of chartered accountants who clearly adapt to change. So
they're probably the early adopters, though, Dermot, is what I was hinting at.
Well, I mean, but that's fair comment. But I think as we move, you know, through the adoption of shall we say, an approved tech stack, then, you know, a lot of, shall we say, zero firms just using zero as a kind of broad term to include other vendors. Then, you know, a lot of those firms who, you know, were the early adopters of the zero ecosystem are now moving into areas, you know, such as how do they, you know, keep talent, develop talent, retain talent. You know, they are looking at the whole, you know, hybrid working situation. So in many ways, you know, having worked with people in the areas of, you know, marketing agencies, then I don't think accountants are a massive way behind certain of those firms who generally, you know, are much younger in terms of age profile. And you would assume, if you generalize, that they would be open to lots of new ideas, because, you know, quite often they're not.
Vipul, we talked earlier about the buzz. Paul mentioned it too. What kind of conversations were you having with people in the breaks and beforehand, particularly the audience that were watching what was happening on the stage?
I think first and foremost, a number of firms brought significant numbers of their team members. You know, some brought 4, 5, 6 members of their team. So I think part of it was very much about them engaging. Yeah. Because we all as leaders can make decisions, but we actually have to bring the team with us. And I think a large part of it was about that, but very much the confidence actually that the industry has. And I think COVID's really brought home the value that we as a profession bring to business owners, but equally the talent that is deployed within all these firms has really gained a huge opportunity to demonstrate what it's capable of. And some will have stepped up. Inevitably, there'll be a few that haven't. And I think that's really why we, you know, the greatest value that we get from the event is that the best people are in a room together and they're sharing best practice. And, you know, I went to a client meeting last week, I think it was, and a client said that when she was at the coffee breaks, she learnt something which she then piped up in the meeting. She was a senior manager and she shared it with the wider group, including partners, that from the conference, this is what had happened and this was the way that the firm should be moving in. So when you talk about what are those conversations about, it's actually these things are working really well. We should be doing these things. And I think you cannot put a, you know, as I said, when I turned up to that meeting, that's when I learned that was the big thing that she'd walked away with. Was happy to share with the wider group within the firm. And I think sometimes that's forgotten. And, you know, we can all stand up on stage, but some of the greatest learnings are from each other.
Yeah. Well, let's get an insight into some of those learnings. I'm going to ask Paul and Dermot, who addressed the audience on the day, what they spoke about. And Aynsley, I'll get your views on the key takeaways you got from their talks and anything else. Paul, you've been presenting to accountants for many years on a variety of topics. What did you choose to talk about on the day, and what were the key takeaways from that?
The primary topic was one of, if I look at every firm over the last couple of years, thanks to the change in the economic status, inflation hitting, everyone's been challenging their firm to price better in order to respond to the inflationary pressures and the need to pay salaries at a higher level and so on. And we're entering into, you know, year 2 for some firms, year 3 of price increases. And in fact, I've just got off a call with a firm who was actually at Vipul's at the Advanced Track conference, talking about that. We feel as though we've got to the limit of how much and how often we can keep upping the prices. And now we've got to talk about, how do we demonstrate better value? How do we, what's the word I'm looking for? Be crystal clear on the value payoff from the client's perspective, which is a different conversation to just having a pricing conversation. So the primary piece was, yes, we can talk about the pricing tactics and processes, and we must, they are vital. Getting those right is vital. Now we've got to, if indeed we shouldn't always have been talking about, how do we articulate value in the client's heart and mind in a better way, which is a different conversation. And as I hinted at earlier in this conversation, is how do we challenge the status quo in the client's heart and minds? Because we're all stuck, you know, we've all got inertia, and actually that's a greater competitor than another firm. How do we tackle that inertia? How do we tackle that status quo so that they go, yes, we need to do something different, which is exactly what Vipul's doing with his conference. And it was exactly the kernel of the piece in the session that I ran. And it was just picking up on something Vipul said earlier. The firm I was talking to had taken many people to the conference, and they'd also taken one or two, how do we put this politely, less enthusiastic influences in decision making around change, and they've come back going, yes, we have got to do this. So they've used, you know, that third party influence of someone else other than, you know, the leader of the firm or a key influence in the firm, saying essentially the same things or similar things, but all of a sudden you get past a roadblock in someone's mind, so that all of a sudden there's buy-in across the firm and implementation's better.
And Aynsley seems to have been talking about pricing forever. And it's well known that price is only ever an objection in the absence of value. So articulating value for accountants is very, very important. From what Paul spoke of on the day, you were there front seat, if you like. What were your key takeaways?
Well, I think it's that we all are creating immense value in what we do on a day-to-day basis, and that we have been doing this for years. We may have imposter syndrome ourselves and may not really feel that we're actually delivering a massive value, and we might take for granted our skills and our inherent abilities and the things that we can do to help small business owners that they don't know. We don't know what you don't know, and we possibly don't know what we do know, because there's quite a huge amount of wealth of information and skills and abilities in there. So I think it was really key to re-emphasize and reinforce that we have an amazing ability to help our clients dramatically shift their businesses. Not just, and can I also say, it's not just about added value work, it's also in the compliance work. Compliance work is vital and important and an ongoing relationship with a client, and it's critical that we get that right. We may over-engineer the process and spend too much time in there and may not price that right, or may not show the value in the compliance work that we're doing. But it's not just all about added value stuff that we're talking about here. It's across the board, the value that accountants can deliver for their clients. I think the real thing on explaining the value is hinting to the potential and working with the client to show them their potential for the future. And I think potential is a really persuasive and valuable word. It hints to something uncertain that's in the future and something that's positive. And I think if we can show and clearly demonstrate the potential, not just for our clients, but for our firm and our team too, that's a dramatic shift in where we move forward. And I think that's a key element that we need to work with in the future.
And Paul, just to close that loop, you talk a lot about future focus and accountants articulating the value in terms of outcomes and results and better decision making for their clients and pushing those through to actions. That's a key part of your message, isn't it?
It is, but also we can't miss out the emotional part of that, Rob. You know, there's we can talk about the numbers all day and the return on investment of making a new decision, implementing a new piece of technology, using outsourcing. But actually, there's an emotional payoff as well, which is a big component of the value equation. And what Aynsley's just said is profoundly powerful, because you talk to a lot of accountants and they go, well, what's your role? Say, oh, we're problem solvers. And you go, yes, but also you're potential hunters. I think what Aynsley's referring to is Paul Dunn and the book Time's Up with Ron Baker. And they make a massive point about, yes, problem solve, but yes, go hunting for potential. And in those two spaces, you can challenge the status quo in the way someone feels and the way they're thinking, so that they make a better decision and as a result feel better because they have got greater confidence in the future of their business.
Yeah, I'll come to your talk in just a moment. But Vipul, what Paul and Aynsley are talking about here reminds me of the term proximity bias. Accountants get so close to what they do that they don't see it as remarkable. A plug for your business name there, Paul, but they do. They think it's quite mundane, it's quite ordinary, because they're super smart, they're super technical, and they don't realize often what a big difference they're making to business owners.
I think that's so true, because a lot of our industry is full of great technicians. So they can go to the relevant paragraph and, right, I know the answer. And it's almost like peacocking. They're showing off that, oh, you know what, I know the answer to this. Whereas actually, some of them are much better than others, you know, and lawyers are great at this. Our profession, perhaps less so, that, oh, I know the answer and I can give you the answer in 5 seconds. Whereas a lawyer will say, actually, oh, that's a really difficult question. I think I should go away and think about it properly and then give you an answer. And because they come back later and you're then presented with this much larger bill, yeah, then whereas if you'd have given them the answer in 3 seconds, they're, oh, well, that was 3 minutes of work. And so why should I be paying lots for it? But actually, it's the old thing about, you know, the guy in the hat with the hammer arriving at the ship. He, you know, it's £1 for the hammer, $9,999 for knowing where to hit the machine. And I think that's where we as a profession, I'm not saying let ourselves down, but we're almost too nice and want to help. And that's shown, you know, pretty much every client that we work with, just full of nice people.
Yeah. And
you know, and I think that's why there is such a longevity in the relationships that we have with the clients that the firms serve.
Of course. Dermot, you spoke on the day with a very well-received session. Tell us what that was about and what the audience took away from that.
Well, my talk was around technology, but, you know, for me, having, you know, been around a few years, then not only have I implemented a lot of software projects, but I've also seen, you know, too many which have not been as successful as possible. So I started off the session with talking about a methodology which Brian Coventry has developed called Envision, which I've used in several firms. And it actually is quite a deep and intense day, which gets the firm to look inward and look at why, you know, certain projects haven't worked as well in the past. So one of the stats we uncovered in one of the firms that I worked with was the fact that there were 33 issues which they identified why previous software implementations had not been successful. And just about half of those were all down to the people within the business. So that's, for example, establishing a process and then the partners coming along and saying, what's that process? Doesn't apply to me. And of course, that immediately screws up the whole of the implementation. And again, if the people who are, you know, working diligently and very hard, you know, look upward and see non-adoption by the leaders of the firm, then they're not going to adopt themselves. So that was part of the project. And then really I gave a bit of an overview of what's going on in the technology space, in the UK accounting tech space at the moment. So obviously, one hot topic is AI, which, you know, if you're a software business and you haven't got your AI strategy in release, then you're certainly out of sync. Now, the point there is AI has actually been around a long time. Just to prove your point about me being around a long time, Rob, I actually joined the technology space in 1992. And at that stage, there was a project being run by IBM called IBM Watson. And that was actually to evaluate and see how AI could be adopted as best practice back in 1992. So AI as a kind of technology has been around an awful long time. It's only quite surprisingly that, like any overnight success, well, it needs to be around that time to be into the overnight success, so to speak, that it's been this year. So we touched upon AI, and of course that will continue to be very interesting and influential this year. One of the areas which I like, based upon my background and kind of brings out my nerdy geeky side, is the suite wars which is taking place at the moment. So by suite wars, I mean the fact that people such as, well, Iris and CCH have dominated, that compliance space for the last X years, some considerable time, but they're coming under increasing pressure from people such as TaxCalc and Numisma and Capium, and even Zero Tax, QBA just about to announce at the bottom end. There's people like Silverfin, coming in at the top end, and both Iris and CCH have got to, release their new cloud-based versions this year. So I covered a little bit of that, and then, also payments. So payments, putting my payments hat on, then. There are a range of businesses which are doing really well in that space. So Cresco, really leading the charge on open banking. You then got other people like Telaroo and Credit, who, are leading with virtual bank accounts, which enables firms to actually, deliver the virtual finance officer piece, and, then we have Unipass, which, are coming in with embedded payments. So again, payments been a really interesting space at the moment with a lot going on.
There's a lot he covered there, Aynsley. And what were the key takeaways for you from Dermot's session?
I think for me, because of my interest in change management, it was the change management piece. And it was the way many firms are built to maintain the status quo. So the structures and layers in their organizations are there to prove why this wouldn't work for us, couldn't work for us, couldn't possibly be introduced in our organization, rather than flipping it on its head and saying, well, if we could make it work here, what would we do to make it work here? I think also that a lot of firms try and scale out the implementation instantly. And I think it's really, it's an impossible task. We need to break it down. And if the first step is here, nobody's going to take that first step. That first step needs to be here, and people need to see the paths of those steps to make sure it's an easy route. I think also we need to set ourselves up for quick wins so that we can tell stories within the firm. We can show how we can build confidence. We can show how it's working, how it could work here. So I think when firms are setting off on implementation, they need to work, as Dermot was talking about, on a framework. I've used in the past the framework from John Cotter, which is our iceberg is melting, that 8-plan step for change management and building all those pieces in between. It doesn't really matter what framework you use, but it's important that you have that framework in place. You don't try and roll it all out instantly. You do plan to get people on board. You have to do that politic piece, and it has to be at play within the organization. So I really enjoy that element of it. And I think it spoke to me. So yeah, it was good.
And I'm going to ask you in just a moment, Aynsley, to wrap up any other sessions that are not represented today that you feel had an impact on the day. So be thinking about that. And Vipul, this has been a really successful event for you. Plans to run it going forward every year and even make it bigger?
We've got the venue for next year already in the can, so to speak. So very excited that this far in advance that we've got the venue secured. So we will be marketing from now for those, put the date in your diary. So hopefully there'll be no additional bank holidays, etc. next year. But we like to think, well, we know the enthusiasm in the room right through the day was fantastic, and that's what the bit that gets me up every morning is the excitement that the firms we work with go and make a difference and go and change the lives of their business owners. And
definitely.
If we keep doing that, then my job's done. Sorry, Paul.
Well, I'm going to ask all of you to finish with a call to arms, if you like, as a reminder to the people that were there, and a nudge to the people that were not there about what they missed, but some kind of action. What would you have them do? What would you have them think about? So be mindful of that in just a moment. But Aynsley, any other points that we missed from sessions that are not represented here today?
Yeah, I think Jamie from Zero had a really good session on the 3 kind of big issues that you have to focus in a firm. One of them was talent, one was reputation, and I think the other was capacity. And I think those are, I think, yeah, good areas to be focusing on. I unfortunately missed Louise' talk, so maybe Vipul can kind of fill, or Paul is going to fill us in on that. So that's really helpful. I also liked Brian Coventry's talk at the end. I think where he was positioned, he gave so much value in there with so many models. I think he tried to cover a bit too much. I think there was too much value in there. I think that was a lesson for me going forward, is less is more in talks. I certainly know the Americans from being out of QuickBooks. Paul and I will laugh at what they might cover. We would cover in 5 minutes. They take an hour to cover. But I certainly think Brian gave so many models in just a short space of time. There was huge value, but I think he probably needs to do another couple of sessions on those. So yeah,
Brian Coventry would probably admit that he's a wonderful thinker and sometimes a little bit ahead of the game. So he'd accept that. Vipul, Aynsley was just saying there was a session from Louise. She's on the very cutting edge of reputation for a firm, the front line, that initial experience for people making contact with the firm. What did she talk about?
It was very much about the different ways in which the different generations are engaging in communicating with an organization, whether it's by phone. And the thing is, whilst the number of phone calls are fewer than perhaps they were before, they're happening for longer, and it's within a certain age bracket. But the younger generation, very much sort of app-based, web-based contact, at least initially, and it's capturing that at that point to make sure you're in the race for that business. Because if you're not, you're missing out on the entrepreneurs of the future. So I think, you know, it was incredibly valuable what Louise was able to share in her short session. And it's based on sort of in-depth research that Moneypenny have taken.
Yeah, well, there's no excuse for being there because you get these messages firsthand. But let's just go around and wrap things up, gentlemen, with any key calls to action you'd love the audience who are watching, listening to be taking to cement this and turn these good ideas and good knowledge into action. Dermot, we'll start with you if we may.
Yeah, thanks. So I would say, you know, certainly for those firms who brought a team or several team members along, then sit down, have a session to reflect, prioritize 3 ideas, and then put a timescale against them, and then, you know, make sure that they are actually implemented.
Paul, accountants are big on professional development, but it's usually quite technical. When you come to a conference like Vipul organised, it's a lot more soft skills and education of a different sort that needs not just to fill your brain up, but to be acted upon. So what would you tell people to do now?
I just want to make reference to Louise's talk. It's a shame she couldn't be on today, given prior commitments, but she was asked a question at the end of her session about the culture at Moneypenny. And actually what was really interesting is in the coffee break, everyone was talking to Louise about how on earth do you create a culture like that? That's because we want a culture that feels like everyone's engaged to the degree with which the Moneypenny team are engaged.
Yes.
And I think, you know, to answer your question, Rob, it's as you'd expect from me with the humanize the numbers message is prioritize the people, which includes clients, yes, but includes probably more so the team, and creating a working environment that, you know, it's that old adage, you treat your team like kings and queens and they'll look after your clients like kings and queens. Well, it seems as though very clearly that's what's going on at Moneypenny. And it was just interesting to see the huge reaction from people almost swamping Louise afterwards because of nothing she intended to talk about, but just something inconsequential. And, you know, people always ask me, you know, in the run up to these events, should we go? And I go, yes, yes, just go. Yeah, but I went last year. It doesn't matter. There will be one simple, elegant, inconsequential, seemingly comment, and that'll just open a door in your head, which you can then implement, whether it's improving the culture of your team, your client care, the use of technology, or whatever. There's as leaders and managers of firms, we have to be open, that growth mindset, and it's show up and then do what Dermot says, which is have an implementation strategy for sure. But you can't have that if you don't show up.
Yeah. And Paul talked about his podcast a little bit there, Vipul, didn't he? Humanize the numbers, which is excellent. We can talk about technology and innovation as much as we like, but people, as Paul was saying, is a key part of the message here for future-proofing a firm, isn't it? What would be your final calls to action for the people watching and listening?
I think exactly what Paul just talked about. The people are so important. We've built a business, and Vipul on his own could not do the number of accounts and tax returns or bookkeeping jobs that we do every day. And we deliver it because we have an amazing team that are here and in India delivering it for people. And sometimes you have to go out of your way to show them that you value them. And we all do it in different ways. It can be simple as bringing biscuits in on a Monday morning or being more extravagant. It doesn't really matter. But I think people need to understand that if you, exactly as Paul shared there, if you do that, they will genuinely care, and you will create that culture of caring within your firm. And it isn't built on minor things that you do occasionally. It's doing those things consistently, and I think that is the biggest message I would give to anybody that's trying to grow a business. Retention is more valuable than any recruitment that you'll ever do today. And obviously we're there to help people in many ways, but first and foremost, I'm a product of a great training firm, and there are many firms like that out there today. And if they want to keep on that journey, especially if they want to stay independent, and I know we did talk about private equity and various other things during the day, but I would say that is the thing. If you want to remain an independent and successful firm, grow your people, and you'll be surprised how much they'll be prepared to take on.
Yeah. And I'll come to you in just a moment, Aynsley, for your final thoughts and actions. But Paul, you've worked with Vipul for some time now as a strategic partner of his. Just give the audience a little flavor of advanced track outsourcing and how they get things so right.
Well, Vipul's said the word they care, and I think if there is a genuine care for the people, for high standards, you ain't going to go far wrong. And I think that's very much how I see Advanced Track, and every person I've interacted with across the Advanced Track team genuinely care about their role, their responsibilities, and their work, and also their clients. And it's there's a humanity to it, which is reflected in the people that he gets to the conference. And that little cameo with Louise, it just shows that. It's just almost in a cameo, there was the people really matter. Yeah, let's look after the people.
And Aynsley, final thoughts from you. It sounds like it was a wonderful event to be at, and we're thankful, aren't we, to be back face to face, see the whites of people's eyes and shake hands. What was your overriding thoughts of the day, and what do you think people should do now?
I mean, it was great. Look, the comment that somebody else made, and I can't remember because there's been so many gems here, was that speaking to other firms, like I was very inquisitive when I had my accounting firm. I was always trying to seek out other people, why they were winning awards, what they were doing differently.
It's that peek over the garden wall, Aynsley, isn't it, to see what others are doing.
Exactly, and you learn so much from others. So I think that was a really, important element of the day. That again, somebody said it can't be, underestimated or overstated. It's just really important. So that was really, really key. I think for me, it was about trusting and empowering your people. I came from a KPMG background. I'm not saying they had a taste, but certainly they did trust and empower their people, because potentially the partners didn't want to do much of the work. Whereas we have in smaller accounting firms, partner-led seems to be the key theme. And I think, unfortunately, that leads to a ceiling, and we need to stop that thinking, and we need to trust our team, and we need to empower them to actually make a massive difference and give them the tools, the processes, the systems, the scripts, the skills, whatever they need to be able to take the action they need to do to drive both themselves, the firm, and our clients forward. I think the big elements for me is the stop the binary thinking. So as accountants, we tend to be focused. So we do this one thing, and then we do this one thing, and then we do this one thing. And I think that's the challenge, because when we're focusing only on this one thing here, we don't know what the impact that's going to have on the other things that are within the firm. It is an ecosystem. So I think we need to stop this binary thinking, and we need to ask, how can we do this and maybe this too? And it's about little changes, not big changes. So it's little changes that we just turn key, and we make massive improvements by making those 1%. So I think that 1% each and every day, I think, is a critical message. And I think the final thing, though, having said all of that, is just do something. I think a lot of people come back with the big long, I used to have a big long list, and I've been there, and these are really interesting things. I've taken loads of notes, and then it sits on the desk on the side of the pile at the side of the desk. And then that goes further and further and further down the bottom of the pile.
That's only you that does that, Aynsley. We never do that.
Okay. And then you get to the end and go, oh my God, this pile needs to be dumped. That list is gone. So please, if you just do one thing, I think would be as well my final point.
That's very good. Well, Aynsley and Dermot and Paul, thank you so much for your time today. And Vipul, we thank you especially, not just for creating advanced track outsourcing with the wonderful culture that it has, but having the vision to put on an event like this, whose brand has grown throughout the years, and to get 4 people in a room, just like all 4 of you are, talking with such warmth and passion about what was clearly really, really successful. You must be thrilled about the future.
Look, there are very few people in life who can say they get up every morning and absolutely love what they do, and let it keep going until I pop my clogs, I guess. But I don't know. I don't know what. I'll carry on as long as I keep enjoying it and I'm making a difference. And 20 years is we're a 20-year success story, I guess.
Well, that's wonderful.
Overnight success.
Indeed. Well, we'll put all your LinkedIn profiles into our show notes and how people can get in touch with you. You're all superb influencers and experts in your own right, doing amazing things, influencing the accounting profession, being a force for good. We thank you so much for your time, your passion, and your insights today. That's been wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Rob.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody.